Welcome to the second night of the Importance of Being Earnest. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jordan, and I've had the honor of directing this cast and crew over the last semester. Before we get started, I do have a few announcements for you all. Firstly, unlike me, the actors, audiences are required to keep their masks on throughout the entirety of this production. I see all of you are doing a great job at that. Keep it up. As well, please silence your cell phones so we don't have any interruptions throughout the production. In the case of an emergency, there are two exits on either side of the room, the one where you came in and this one behind me. I ask that if you need to leave for any reason during the show, you exit out this door and know that our ushers will not be reopening the doors until intermission. So if you need to leave for whatever reason, unfortunately, you won't be able to come back in. We also have a few content warnings for the show, and they are as follows. Lying to a partner, manipulating a partner, a joke about suicide, classism, ableism and ableist language, sexism, marriage between cousins, child abandonment, references to adultery, discussions of religion and heresy, controlling guardianship, mentions of death and lying about death, jokes about overeating and sudden loud noises, which happen in the final scene after Lady Bracknell's entrance. The show runs about 2 hours and 15 minutes, with a 15-minute intermission between the first and second half. Thank you all so much for coming, and enjoy the show.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire. Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them. Perfectly, you must amuse them. By the way, you're is, I believe in men, all the excitement is over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I shall certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
And there's no use speculating on that. Divorces were made in heaven. Please do not touch the cucumber sandwiches. They were made especially for Aunt Augusta.
But you have been eating them all this time.
And that's quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Have some bread and butter instead. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Perfectly good bread and butter it is too.
You need not eat if you're going to eat at all. You act as though you're married to her already. You're not married to her already, and I don't think you will be.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in the first place, girls don't marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it's right.
That is nonsense.
It isn't. It's the great truth. It counts for the extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place these days. And in the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent.
My dear boy, Gwendolen is my first cousin. And before I allow you to marry her, you'll have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean by that? What do you mean, dear Algie, by Cecily? I've never known of a person named Cecily in my life.
Bring me the cigarette case that Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he was here.
Yes, sir. Do you mean to say that my cigarette case has been here all this time? I wish to goodness you had told me. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
I wish you would. I have to be more than usually hard up.
There's no use offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I must say, I think that's very cool of you, Ernest. However, no, it doesn't matter. For now that I look at the thing, I find that it isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You must have seen me written 100 times. You have no right whatsoever to read what's written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it's absurd to have a hard and fast rule of what one should read and shouldn't read. More than half of modern culture is based on what one shouldn't read.
I'm perfectly aware of that. I don't propose we discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk about in private. I just want my cigarette case back.
Well, yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said yourself, you don't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, darling old lady she is too, lives in Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt who lives in Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear brother, what on earth was there in that? Some aunts were told, some aunts were not told. Surely that is a matter that every aunt should be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That's absurd. Good heavens, Algie, give me back my cigarette.
We're going to your aunt, why you her uncle. From Little Cecily, her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack, there's no objection I admit to an aunt being small. Why not? No matter what her size, I mean, she called her own nephew her uncle. I can't quite make out. Besides, her name's Jack and Alex Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
You've always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as though your name were Ernest. You're the most earnest-looking person I ever met in my entire life. It's perfectly absurd you're saying that your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing before the Albany. I shall do this as proof that your name is Ernest. If ever you should attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
Well, my name's Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and that cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, that does not explain why your little Aunt Cecily calls you her dear uncle. Come on, boy, you'd better have the whole thing out of this.
My dear fellow, you are talking exactly as though you were a dentist. It's a very vulgar thing to talk quite handedly. The place is not in trouble.
Oh, well, I expected that. I've Bunbury and other shops are on two separate occasions. Tell me, why you aren't in town, Jack, if I can't come?
My dear boy, I don't know if you can understand my real motives. You're hardly serious enough. See, one is placed in the position of guardian. One must adopt a high moral tone on all subjects. And seeing as a high moral tone does not conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always told people that I have a younger brother named Ernest, who resides at the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That's the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be tedious if it were, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Oh, literary criticism is not your forte, dear fellow. Don't try that. You should leave that sort of thing to people who haven't been to universities. They do so well in the daily papers, but I wasn't quite right in saying you're a Bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean by that?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest in order that you may be able to come up to town whenever you like. I have invented a perfectly invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to come down into the country whenever I choose. Why, Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for him and his extraordinarily bad health, for example, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for really I've been promised to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. It's so careless of you. You always forget to send out invitations. There's nothing that annoys one so much as not receiving an invitation.
You would much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
Oh, I certainly won't do that. In the first place, I dine with her on Monday, and once a week is more than enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family, and sent out as either no woman at all, or two. In the third place, I know who she'll place me next time. She'll place me next to Mary Farber, who always flirts with her own husband at the dinner table. And that is not very pleasant. Indeed, it's hardly indecent, and that kind of thing is immensely on the rise. The number of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is grotesque. It looks so bad. It's simply washing one's own clean linen in public. And besides, now that I know you to be a Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. Gwendolen accepts my proposal. I'm going to kill my brother. In fact, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather poor. So I'm getting rid of Ernest. And I strongly advise you to do the same with your England friend, the absurd name.
I'm certainly not going to get rid of Bunbury, and if you do ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury is a tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she is the only girl I've ever met who I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to understand that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
My dear friend, that is the theory the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 30 years.
Oh, yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
Don't be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
It isn't perfectly easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever bring in that Wagnerian manner. But if I distract her for 10 minutes so you can have the opportunity of proposing Gwendolen, may I dine with Mr. Willis's?
I suppose so. If you want to.
Yes, but only if you're serious about it. I love people who aren't serious about meals. It's so shallow of them. Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm certainly feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
Those are hardly the same thing. In fact, the two rarely go together.
My, you look smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for development, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry we're a little late, Algernon. I was obliged to call on Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her husband died. I've never seen a woman so changed. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and some of those cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Leigh, why are there no cucumber sandwiches?
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumber?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
Oh, that would be all, Leigh. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very much distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
Really is no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure these days.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from green.
It certainly has changed its color, though from what cause, I can't say. I have a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Parker. Such a lovely woman and so attentive to her husband. It's a delight to watch them.
Well, that's very sweet, Aunt Augusta, but I'm afraid I won't be able to dine with you not at all tonight.
As you know, that is not the case, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is used to that, though.
Well, you see, it's a great trouble and no doubt a dreadful bore, Aunt Augusta, but the truth is I've just had a telegram from Mr. Bunbury. His health has taken a turn for the worse. The doctors seem to think I should be with him.
It is strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Oh yes, poor Bunbury's a dreadful infant.
Algernon, I think it is high time that your friend, Mr. Bunbury, made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness is not something that should be encouraged. In fact, health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling your uncle this, but he never seems to listen, particularly as regards his own ailment. Algernon, I would be much obliged if you asked Mr. Bunbury for me not to have a relapse on Saturday, where I require someone to arrange my music. It's my last reception of the season, and someone always wants something that encourages conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has said whatever they had to say already, which in most cases was probably not much.
Well, I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. And I think I can promise he'll be all right by Saturday. The music, of course, is very difficult. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen, and if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I've drawn a program, and if you'll come with me into the next room, we can look over it.
Thank you, Algernon. It's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful with a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they are improper, and I look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German, I think, sounds a thoroughly respectable language. In fact, I think it is one. Gwendolen, you'll accompany me.
Yes, Mama.
Charming day, Helen, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
But I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you,
I have admired you more than any girl I've ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact, and I have often wished that in public at any rate you'd been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in more expensive monthly magazines, has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something in the name that inspires absolute confidence. When Algie first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen.
Passionately.
My daughter, you don't know how happy you've made me.
Ernest. My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is. But you don't really mean that you couldn't love me if it were something else.
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, I don't much care for the name Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolen, I think there are lots of other, more charming names. I think Jack, for instance, a perfectly charming name.
Jack? No. There is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. I have known several Jacks, and they all were, without exception, more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for the name John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She will probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolen, I've got to be christened once. I mean, we have got to be married once. There is no time to lose.
Married, Mr. Worthing.
Well, surely, Miss Fairfax, you know that I love you. You would let me to believe that at any rate you were not entirely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you have not proposed to me yet. Nothing at all has been said about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
May I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, I will tell you quite frankly beforehand that I'm fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolen, darling.
Yes? What have you got to say to me?
You know what I have got to say to you.
Yes, but don't say it.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course, darling. How long you have been about it. I'm afraid you've had very little practice in how to propose.
My own one, I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially with your other presents. I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finish what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
Pardon me? You're engaged to no one. If you were to get engaged, your father or myself would let you know of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a below in the carriage.
Mama.
The carriage. Well. Unspoiled nature such as Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I do own a home on Belgrave Square, but I rented yearly to Lady Blossom. Of course, I can get it back at any point, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Blossom. I don't know her.
She doesn't get out very often. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is hardly a guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that can easily be altered.
The fashion or the sun?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
I'm afraid I have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
They count as Tories. They dine with us sometimes, or come round in the evening at any rate. Now, to more minor concerns. Are your parents living?
I'm afraid I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, can be regarded as bag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station, could be used to disguise some social indiscretion. Indeed, it's probably been used for that before now. And it really could not be regarded as a sure basis for a recognized position in good society.
Well, in that case, Lady Bracknell, may I ask what you would have me do? I need hardly say I'd do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolen's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to acquire some relations as soon as possible and make a definite effort to produce one packet of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I can possibly do that. I can produce the handbag for you at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that ought to be enough for you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly think that Lord Bracknell or myself would allow our daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and make an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning! We are married already. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without having the common decency to be admit that Oh. I'm quite sorry, Algernon. I suppose I shouldn't talk that way about your aunt in front of you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a few tedious pack of people who haven't the slightest idea of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, let's not argue about it, Algie. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
By my word. If I felt that way, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolen becoming like her mother in about 150 years? Do you, dear Algie?
All women become like their mothers. That's their tragedy. No man does, that's his.
Was that clever?
It is perfectly phrased and quite as true as any observation in polite society should be nowadays.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. It's become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fool? Why, about the clever people, of course.
What fool?
And by the way, have you told Gwendolen yet about your being earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't the sort of thing one tells a nice, sweet, refined girl like Gwendolen. What absurd ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she's pretty, and to someone else if she's plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
And what about your brother? What about profligate Ernest?
Oh, I'll have gotten rid of him by the end of the week. I'll say he died in Paris. Apoplexy or something like that. Lots of people die quite suddenly of apoplexy, don't they? just 19.
And have you told Gwendolen yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 19?
Oh, one doesn't blurt these things out to people. Gwendolen and Cecily are sure to be great friends. I'll bet you anything, within an hour of meeting, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only call each other that when they have called each other a lot of other things first. Time. If you want to go and get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. You know it's nearly 7.
It always is nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Shall we go to the club?
Oh no, I hate talking.
Then shall we go to the theater?
No, I loathe listening.
Then we could trot round to the Empire at 10.
I can't bear looking at things. So silly. Then what shall we do? Nothing.
It is terribly hard work doing nothing. However, I'm not opposed to hard work, but there's no definite object of any kind. Miss Fairfax. Gwendolen.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
I don't know that I can allow this, Gwendolen. It seems very improper.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. I don't think you're quite old enough to do that. Ernest. We may never be married. From the look on Mama's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mama, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing she can do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, Gwendolen.
The story of your romantic origin, as relayed to me by Mama, unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your moral character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
They have good postal service, I suppose. It may become necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily. How long do you remain in town?
Till London.
Algie, you may turn around.
Thanks. I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
May I escort you to your carriage, Miss Fairfax?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
Really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you
It didn't end happily. I hate when novels end happily. It depresses me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so. But it seems rather unfair. Was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, is abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or misleading. To work, child, speculations and profits.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, what a delightful surprise!
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust. Well,
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I've not mentioned anything about a headache.
Yes, Miss Prism, I know, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. In fact, I was thinking about that, and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. The metaphor was drawn from bees. Has Mr. Worthing arrived from town yet?
We do not respect him until Wednesday afternoon.
Ah, yes, he usually likes to spend his Sundays at home. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts, that unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I will not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical illusion merely, drawn from the pagan operas. I shall see both no doubt at even song.
A moment, Dr. Chasuble. I think I will have strolled you. After all, I find I do have a headache after all, and to walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the volume may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Worthing to come here. Oh, and I suppose you'd better talk to the housekeeper about a room for them?
Yes, miss.
I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he'll just look like everybody else. He does.
You must have Cecily, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm afraid there must be some mistake. I'm not little at all. In fact, I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily, and you, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest, my wicked cousin Ernest.
No, I'm not really wicked, cousin Cecily. You mustn't believe that I'm wicked.
Well, if you're not, then you've certainly been deceiving us all in a very excusable manner. I should hate to think you've been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked while really being good all the while. That would be hypocrisy.
Of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the matter, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that. Though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back until Monday afternoon.
That is a shame. I'm obliged to go by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
Well, no, the appointment is in London.
Well, of course, I know how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty in life, but I still think you'd better wait till Uncle Jack comes back. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
Your emigrating. But he's just gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you'll be requiring neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd rather die.
He said at dinner Wednesday night that you have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, the accounts that I've heard of Australia and of the next world are not this afternoon.
It's rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse. That is because I'm hungry. How thoughtless of me. I forgot when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Oh, thank you. Might I have a buttonhole? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole.
A marshal meal?
No, I'd rather eat rose.
Why?
Because you all like to eat rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it would be quite right for you to speak to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the most beautiful girl I ever saw in my life.
Miss Prism says all the books are a snare.
And they're a snare which every sensible man should like to be caught.
Well, I don't think I should like to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much of a dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A woman's throat, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, is distinctly against matrimony.
Well, that is obviously why the primitive church has not survived until the present day. And you must understand, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often I've been told not even to her.
Then it depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended upon. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphors drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing,
We did not expect you until Monday afternoon.
I returned quite sooner than expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of road does not token some terrible calamity.
My brother,
More debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life with pleasure.
dead,
Your brother Ernest dead.
quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust you will profit.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I offer my sincere condolences. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but still, it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad, in Paris. In fact, I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
What's the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
A man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am particularly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be married in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. Joyful or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, at christenings, at confirmations, on days of humiliation, and festival days. The last time I preached it was in the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of society for the prevention of discontent among the upper orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me, Dr. Chasuble, you mentioned christening, I think. I don't suppose you're any good at it. I
not?
Yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child. I am very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember a thing about it.
But have you grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if you have any misgivings, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all, not at all. The sprinkling and indeed immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion.
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed, I think, advisable. Our rhetorics are changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony before?
Oh, I might trot round about 5.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I had 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that same time. A case of twins that occurred in one of the outlying regions on a cottage on your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't want to be baptized along with other babies. That would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into your house of sorrow. I would really beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seems to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me to be a blessing of extremely obvious kind. Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm so pleased to see you back, but what horrid clothes do you have on? Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My dear, my dear.
What's the matter, Uncle Jack? You look happy. You look as if you had a toothache. I have such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother. Who? Your brother, Ernest. He arrived about a half an hour ago. Oh, I haven't got a brother. Don't say that. No matter how poorly he may have behaved to you in the past, he's still your brother. I'll tell him, go tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we've all been resigned to his loss, sudden return seems to be killingly distressing. My brother in the dining room? I don't know what it all means. I think it's perfectly absurd. Good heavens! Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I'm very sorry for leading such a bad life, and I intend to change my ways in the future. Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand. Nothing would induce me to shake his hand. I think his coming here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well what. Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often, and well, surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of town to go and sit beside a bed of pain. Bunbury! He has been talking about Bunbury, has he? Yes, he told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his dreadful state of health. Oh! Well, I won't have him talking to you about Bunbury or anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly cracked. Of course, I admit the faults were all on my side. However, I must say I think it's peculiarly painful. Brother John's poor treatment of me. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering that this is the first time I have come here. Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you. Never forgive me? Never, never, never. Fine. But this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation. I think we may leave the 2 brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us. Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
Oh, we must not be too premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
Jack! I have unpacked Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir,
his luggage.
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
Merriman, fetch the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has been suddenly called back into town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I've not been called anywhere.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
Well, not to talk of Miss Carter in that way. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly absurd. Why don't you go up and change? It's perfectly absurd to be in deep mourning for a man who's really staying with you at your house as your guest for a whole week.
You're not staying here for a week as a guest or anything else. You've got to catch the 4:05 train back into London.
I certainly won't leave you. Not so long as you're in mourning. It would be terribly unfriendly of me. I should expect you would stay with me were I in mourning. I would be very unkind if you didn't.
Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, but only if you're quick about it. I never saw anyone take so long to dress and with such little result.
It is better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden is absurd. But you've got to catch the 4:05 train back into town, and I wish you a pleasant journey home. This thundering, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. I must see her again before I go. Make arrangements for another fundraising. There she is.
I merely came out to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to fetch the dog cart for me.
He's going to take me for a nice drive.
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It is a very painful parting.
It's always painful to part from people one has known a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation to anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable. Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
Can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope it shall not be too frank and forward of me to tell you, Miss Cardew, that ever since I first gazed upon your wonderful and incomparable visage, you have seemed to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your candor does you great credit, Chris. If you'll allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
You keep a diary. Are you ready to see it, may I?
Oh, no. It's merely a very young girl's record of her thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you'll order a copy, but pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can continue. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is giving dictation, one should always speak quite fluently and not cough. And besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Miss Cardew, ever since I first saw you, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should say you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily!
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Oh, tell him to come round next week at the same time.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same time.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy. Of course. Why, we've been
how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack confessed to me that he had a brother who was very wicked and bad, you have, of course, formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And the man who is very much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, Ernest, but I fell in love with you.
Darling, and how was the engagement settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I resolved to settle the matter one way or another, and after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day I went out and bought a ring in your name. Oh, and this is the bangle with the true lover's knot, which I promised you always to wear.
Did I buy it? It is very pretty, isn't it?
Yes. You've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life. And this is the box, which I keep all of your dear letters.
My letters?
Yes.
Cecily, I never wrote you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember far too well how I was forced to write them myself. I wrote always 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
May I read them?
Oh no, they would make you far too conceited. 3 you wrote me after I had broken off our engagement were so beautiful and so badly spelled that, well, even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
Was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can read the diary entry if you'd like. Today I broke off our engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
How could you do this, Cecily? How could you break off our engagement? I had done nothing. I had done nothing at all. Particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once, but I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. Do I have a girl naturally? I hope it does.
Yes, a little help for mother.
I'm so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, will you, Cecily?
I don't think I can break it off now that I've actually met you. But besides, there's the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You mustn't make fun of me, but it's always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone who is called Ernest. There's something in the name that seems to inspire one with absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
Do you mean to say that you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
What name?
Any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my own dear sweet freedom dog, I can't see any reason why you should object to the name of Algernon. It's quite a nice name. In fact, it's very aristocratic name. More than half the chaps that get themselves into bankruptcy court are called Algernon. Really, Cecily? If my name were Algernon, couldn't you love me?
I might admire you, Ernest. I might respect your character, but I'm afraid to say I couldn't give you my undivided attention.
Your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in all the rites and ceremonies of the church.
Yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He's never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on most important christening, on most important business.
Oh,
I shan't be gone more than half an hour.
well, seeing as we've been engaged since February the 14th, and I only just met you today, it seems rather a hard thing you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so am Cecily Carter.
Cecily Carter, what a very sweet name. Something tells me that we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other such a comparatively short amount of time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
Well, if you like.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this would be an admirable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. To me, the home seems to be the proper sphere for the man, and certainly once he begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes one so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, no, not at all, Gwendolen. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh, no, I live here.
Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
No, I have no mother, nor indeed any relations.
Indeed.
Yes, my guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian? Yes?
I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. It is strange that he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I'm not sure, however, that this news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I met you. But I'm bound to state, now that I know you were Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little bit older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Oh, pray do. I think whenever one has something unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He's the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influences of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, provides us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
Pardon me, Miss Fairfax. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Well, it's not Mr. Ernest Worthing who's my guardian. It's his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they've not been on good terms for some time.
Oh, that accounts for it. And now that you mention it, I've never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems quite distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud were to come across a friendship like ours. Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolen, I see no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact within the next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I feel that there must have been some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid there must have been some mistakes. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he proposed to me yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One must always have something sensational to read on the train. I'm so sorry sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor boy has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten himself into, I will never reproach him for it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you mean to suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time to wear the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there any interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties! I don't think I should like that. I hate
I
crowds.
suppose that's why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden, this is Miss Cardew.
I'm so glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Yes, flowers are as common here, Gwendolen, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country if anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
That's what the newspapers are calling agricultural depression, is it not? I hear the aristocracy are very much affected with it just at present. It's almost an epidemic amongst them. May I offer you some tea?
Yes, thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea. Sugar? No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I ask most distinctly for bread and butter, you've given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition, for the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my dear, sweet, trusted boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I must be trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest! My own Ernest!
Gwendolen, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you were engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear Miss Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must have been some slight error, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh!
My God, this is Ernest. One moment. There's one question I would like to be permitted to ask you. Are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? To... Good heavens, Gwendolen!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolen, I mean. Of course not. What could put such an idea into your pretty little head? Thank you. You may.
I felt that there had been some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who's now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I me to have to speak the truth. In fact, it is the most painful position I have ever been in my life. I'm quite inexperienced in anything of the kind. But I may tell you quite candidly that I have no brother Ernest. In fact, I have no brother at all. I've never had a brother, and I certainly have no intention of having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Have you never a brother, any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us are engaged to be married to anyone.
It's not a very pleasant position for a young girl to find herself in.
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you would call bunburying, I suppose.
Oh, yes, and a perfectly wonderful bunbury. It is the most wonderful bunbury I ever saw in my whole life.
Well, you've no right whatsoever to bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has the right to bunbury wheresoever he chooses. Every serious bunburyist knows that.
Serious bunburyist.
Well, I have to be serious about something. If one wants to have any kind of excitement in life, I happen to be serious about bunburying. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't the slightest idea. About everything, I should imagine. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
The only small satisfaction I can get from this whole affair is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. It won't be quite so easy for you to run off to the country as it used to be, dear Algie, and a very good thing, too.
Your brother Ernest is looking a little off color, isn't he, Jack? You won't be able to come to town quite so often as your wicked way was, and not a bad thing either.
And as for your conduct towards Miss Cobb, I think perfectly inexcusable your taking in a sweet, innocent, simple girl like that, to say nothing of the fact she is my ward.
I can think of no possible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to marry Gwendolen, that was all. I'm in love with her.
I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cobb.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
That is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It's very vulgar to talk about one's own business. Nobody ever does except for people like stockbrokers, and then only at dinner parties.
How you can sit there, eating muffins, while we are in this terrible trouble I can't make out. It seems to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, one must always look harmless while eating muffins. If I ate them in an agitated manner, the butter would probably get on my cuffs. One must always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I think it's perfectly harmless you're eating muffins at all, under the circumstances. And there is no reason for you to be eating them all in that rate.
Oh, Jack! But have some tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens! I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
You just said it was perfectly harmless to be eating muffins at all.
I said it was perfectly harmless for you to eat muffins under the circumstances. That is an entirely different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algie, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner first. I never go without my dinner. Nobody ever does except for vegetarians and people like that. And besides, I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Ernest.
My dear fellow, sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning to be christened by Dr. Chasuble, and I naturally should take the name of Ernest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be named Ernest. That would be absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened by life. There is no evidence anywhere that I have ever been christened by anybody. I should think it perfectly likely
yes, but I've not been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
You know, I must say I think it's quite dangerous if you're not quite sure about your having ever been christened to embark on it now. After all, the weather is so poorly these days, and you can hardly have forgotten that just this week, someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off in Paris by a severe chill.
But you said yourself that a severe chill is not hereditary.
Well, it used to be, my dear boy, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
That is nonsense.
Oh, Jack, grab the buttons again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only two of them left.
But I hate tea cake.
And I don't allow tea cake to be served in your garden, to your guests, and your home. What idea you have of hospitality?
Ouch! Why don't you leave? I don't want you here. I've already asked you to go. Just go.
But I haven't quite finished my tea. Besides, there are still 2 months left.
The fact that they did not follow us at once into the house seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They've been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. Well, that's very forward of them.
Let's observe a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
No, certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, there's just one question I would like to be permitted to ask you. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother, in order that I might have the opportunity of meeting you? Well, that certainly seems a satisfactory response, does it not?
Yes, if you can believe him.
Well, I don't. But that doesn't affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of great importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer for pretending to have a brother? Was it that you might have the opportunity of coming up to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairclough?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the time for German skepticism. Their answers seem to be satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I'm more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
So you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean no.
Right. I had forgotten. There are some principles at stake which one cannot surrender. Which one of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. We take the time for me.
Certainly. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all. Our Christian names are all.
We're going to be Christians
This afternoon.
For me, you are prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am. So please me, you're ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am. How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes where matters of self-sacrifice are concerned. Men are infinitely beyond us.
We are!
Lady Bracknell!
Good heavens! Gwendolen! What is the meaning of this?
Merely that I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here, sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, of physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's flight by her trusty handmaid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I followed her at once by luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. In fact, I have never undeceived him. I would consider it wrong. As for you, Mr. Worthing, you must understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are no such thing. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Algernon,
This is the house of your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury.
Bunbury? No, Bunbury doesn't live here. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead! When did he die? It must have been very sudden.
I killed Bunbury this afternoon. Poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of revolutionary outrage? I had no idea that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If he was, he's quite well punished for his morbidity.
I mean, Aunt Augusta, that he was found out. It was found out that poor Bunbury could not live. That is what I mean, and so Bunbury died.
He must have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. But I am glad that he made up his mind to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. Now that we've gotten rid of Mr. Bunbury, Mr. Worthing, who is this young person whose hand my nephew Algernon appears to be holding in what I might say is a particularly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
Cecily and I are engaged to be married, Aunt Augusta.
Pardon me?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married.
I do not know if there is anything particularly exciting in the air of this part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seems to me to be well above the proper average for us laid out by statistics. I think some preliminary investigation on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, Southwest, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporadic, Fisher, Italy.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period, and they are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby, and Markby. A firm with the very highest prestige in their field. In fact, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally seen at dinner parties. Thus far, I am satisfied.
A very kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I am also in my riot.
A life crowded with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. Gwendolen, we must depart. We have not a moment to lose. Mr. Worthing, I do feel bound to ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, only about £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. It's a pleasure seeing you.
A moment of your time, Mr. Worthing. £130,000. And in the funds, now that I look at her, Miss Cecily seems to me a peculiarly attractive young lady. Few girls of this age have any of the really solid qualities, any of the qualities that improve over time. Come here, my dear. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair is as nature might have left it, but that can soon be altered. A really good French maid can have a remarkable effect in a very brief space of time. In fact, I remember recommending one to Lady Lansing. Within 3 months, her own husband didn't know her.
And in 6 months, nobody knew her.
Turn around, my dear. No, the side is what I want. It is as I suspected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The two weak points of our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin a little higher, my dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn, and it is worn very high at present. Algernon!
Yes, Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the dearest, sweetest, prettiest girl in the whole world. And I don't care tuppence about social possibilities.
Never speak ill of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Miss Cardew, I'm sure you know that my nephew Algernon has nothing to depend upon but his debts. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. In fact, when I met Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of letting that stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
Cecily, you may kiss me. And you may call me Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Well, I think the wedding should take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I frankly do not approve of long engagements. They give people the time to get to know one another before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
Pardon me, Lady Bracknell, but I'm afraid this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and according to the terms of her grandfather's will, until she reaches the legal age of consent, she cannot marry without my consent. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds? My nephew Algernon is an extremely, I might say ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me, Lady Bracknell, to have to speak frankly to you about your nephew. But the fact is, I do not approve of his moral character. I suspect him of being dishonest.
Dishonest? My nephew Algernon? Impossible! He is an Oxonian!
I'm afraid there can be no doubt about the matter. Yesterday, or this afternoon, he obtained admission to my home under the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, I have just been informed drained an entire half-pint bottle of Pierre Jouet Brut, 89, wine I had been specially reserving for myself. Continuing this gross deception, he succeeded, over the course of an afternoon, alienating the affections of my only boy. Subsequently, stayed for tea, where he devoured every single muffin. What makes this conduct all the more obvious is the fact that he was very well aware from the start that I have no brother, that I have never had a brother, and that I have no intention of having a brother. I distinctly told him so myself this afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, upon further consideration, I have decided to overlook my nephew's conduct to you entirely.
How very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, my dear. How old are you, darling?
Well, I really will be 19, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are quite right in making some alteration. A woman should never be honest about her age. It looks so calculating. 19. But admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, you will soon be of age and free from the restraints of tutelage, so I hardly see why your guardian's consent is required.
Miss Lady Bracknell, pray excuse me for interrupting you again, but I think it's only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not reach the age of consent until she is 35.
35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of ladies of the very highest birth who have, of their own free will, elected to remain 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton's a case in point. She's been 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was some years ago now. I see no reason why Miss Cardew shouldn't be more attractive at that age than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me until I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily.
You know I could. No, you could. I felt instinctively that you could. But I couldn't wait all that time. Well, I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anything. It makes me very cross. I know I'm not punctual, but I do like punctuality in others. Waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
What shall we do, Miss Cardew?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew positively states, she cannot wait until she is 35. A fact which I might say, my dear, does show some impatience of character. I beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But Lady Bracknell, matter is entirely in your hands. The moment you give your consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will happily allow your nephew to form a union with my lord.
You must know that what you propose is quite impossible.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Gwendolen, we must try about 6 trains already to expose any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is ready for the christenings.
The christenings? Do you not think that is somewhat premature, sir?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age?
views I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. But as your mood seems to be one purely secular, I shall return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you say Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I am on my way to join her.
Pray let me detain you for a moment. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected to education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, and the very picture of respectability.
It is doubtlessly the same woman. What role does she serve in your house?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has for the last 3 years been Miss Cardew's most esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must speak to her. Let her be sent for.
She approaches, she is
I
nigh.
was told you expected me the best preacher can, and I've been waiting for you there for an hour to read 4 toasts.
Prism! Come here, Prism! Prism! Where is that baby? "28 years ago, Prism, you departed Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, in possession of a perambulator which contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was found at midnight, standing alone in a remote corner of Bayswater. In it was a 3-volume manuscript of a novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism! Where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I must admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish that I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day that you mentioned, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript for a work of fiction which I had written in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I will never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, I'm afraid that this is a matter of no small personal importance to me. I must insist on knowing where you deposited the infant that was contained in that handbag.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
Which railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. When? Wait here for me?
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. Strange coincidences are not supposed to happen in families of high class. It's hardly considered a thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian is very emotional nature.
It sounds like he's having an argument. I hate arguments. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
I wish you would come to some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Alger's elder brother? I always knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Algie, you will have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never acted to me as a brother in your life.
Not till today, old boy. I admit, though I did my best. I was out of practice.
My own. But what own are you now that you've become someone else?
Good heavens, I'd quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
Then the matter had better be cleared up at once. Lady Bracknell, when Miss Prism deposited me in that handbag, had I been christened?
Every luxury that money can buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
The eldest son. You were consequently christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present recall. I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, though. What between the Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and other things of that type.
Algie, I don't suppose you recall what our father's Christian name was.
My dear fellow, we were never even on speaking terms. He died a year after I was born.
Aunt Augusta, would it be in the army lists of the period?
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt that his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years of the year. These delightful records should have been my constant study. In generals, Malum, Maximum, Maddy, what ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief, Lieutenant 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, General, 1869, Christian names, Ernest John. I always told you, didn't I, Gwendolen, that my name is Ernest? But it really is Ernest. I mean, it naturally is Ernest.
I always knew I had some reason for disliking that name.